Sophie Cunningham just did something the WNBA never saw coming, and now the entire league is scrambling to figure out what happens next. The Indiana Fever guard has gone completely rogue, and what she exposed about the league's treatment of Caitlin Clark has officials in full panic mode. This isn't just about a $500 fine anymore. This is about a player who decided she'd had enough of watching the biggest star in women's basketball get brutalized while referees looked the other way. What Sophie revealed in her latest press conference has sent shockwaves through the basketball world. She didn't just criticize the officiating. She exposed a pattern so disturbing that fans are now questioning everything they thought they knew about how the WNBA operates. And here's the thing that should terrify league officials. Sophie's not backing down. In fact, she's doubling down in ways that nobody expected. Before we dive into the explosive details, make sure you hit that like button if you think players should be allowed to speak their minds without getting fined. And subscribe because we're about to break down exactly why Sophie Cunningham might be the most important player in the WNBA right now, and it has nothing to do with her stats. The transformation of Sophie Cunningham from role player to revolutionary didn't happen overnight. When she joined the Indiana Fever, most people saw her as a solid veteran presence, someone who could provide leadership and toughness off the bench. But what happened over the past few months has turned her into something much more dangerous for the league, a truth teller with nothing to lose. It started during that infamous Commissioner Cup game against Connecticut. Marina Mabrey had just bulldozed Caitlin Clark for what felt like the 100th time that night. No whistle, no call, just another moment where the league's golden goose was getting plucked while officials pretended not to notice. Sophie watched from the bench as her teammate picked herself up off the floor again, and something inside her snapped. Not in an emotional way, but in a calculated, I've seen enough kind of way. What most people don't know is that Sophie had been documenting everything. Every uncalled foul on Clark, every suspicious no call, every moment where it seemed like there was a different set of rules for different players. She'd been building a case, and when she finally spoke out, she didn't just complain about one game. She laid out a pattern that went back months. You can fine me $500. You can fine me $5,000. Hell, fine me $50,000, Sophie said in that now viral press conference. But I'm going to keep talking about this because what's happening to Caitlin isn't basketball. It's assault, and everyone knows it. Those words sent the WNBA into damage control mode immediately. Within hours, league officials were on conference calls trying to figure out how to handle what they called the Cunningham situation. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sophie wasn't done, not even close. What happened next would shock everyone who thought a simple fine would silence her. Instead of apologizing or walking back her comments, Sophie went on every podcast that would have her. She appeared on shows that the WNBA couldn't control, platforms where she could speak freely without worrying about league censorship. And what she revealed during those appearances has changed everything. Sophie explained how she'd watched game film with statistical analysis showing that Caitlin Clark was fouled an average of 12 times per game without calls, while other star players averaged only 3 uncalled fouls. She had receipts. She had video evidence. She had everything the league didn't want the public to see. Look at the numbers, Sophie said on one podcast. Caitlin generates more revenue for this league than any player in history. She's filling arenas, she's bringing in new fans, she's making everyone money, and they're letting her get destroyed out there because of what? Jealousy? Politics? It's disgusting. The response from fans was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support for Sophie, with hashtags like Save Caitlin and Cunningham was right trending for days. Ticket holders started threatening boycotts. Sponsors began asking uncomfortable questions. The WNBA found itself in a crisis entirely of its own making, but Sophie's rebellion went beyond just words. She started doing something on the court that drove officials crazy, but technically wasn't against any rules. Every time an opponent got too physical with Clark, Sophie would step in, not with violence, but with presence. She'd position herself between Clark and the aggressor, staring them down, making it clear that if the refs wouldn't protect the league's biggest star, she would. This created a fascinating dynamic. Opponents knew that going after Clark meant dealing with Sophie. Referees couldn't penalize her for simply standing near her teammate. Fans absolutely loved it. Sophie Cunningham merchandise sales skyrocketed. Her jersey became the second best seller on the team, right behind Clark's. The league tried everything to regain control. They issued new guidelines about intimidation tactics. They increased fines for conduct detrimental to the game. They even tried to schedule meetings with Sophie to discuss her concerns privately. But Sophie refused to play their game. She kept everything public, kept everything transparent, and most importantly, kept everything focused on the real issue: player safety. fair officiating. What really pushed things over the edge was when Sophie revealed something that nobody outside the league knew. During a live interview, she disclosed that several veteran players had privately thanked her for speaking out. These were established stars who'd been in the league for years, players who'd watched the double standard but felt powerless to address it. You want to know the really messed up part? Sophie said during that interview. Half the players who are roughing up Caitlin don't even want to do it. They're being pressured either directly or indirectly to put the rookie in her place. It's sick. That revelation sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Suddenly, this wasn't just about bad officiating. This was about a culture within the WNBA that was actively working against its own best interests. Sophie had pulled back the curtain on something much bigger than anyone realized. The Indiana Fever organization found themselves in an impossible position. On one hand, Sophie was creating controversy, drawing fines. On the other hand, she was protecting their franchise player and saying what their entire fan base was thinking. When reporters asked the team for comment, they gave the most telling non-answer in sports history. Sophie Cunningham is a valued member of our organization who plays with passion and integrity. Translation, we're not stopping her. But the story takes an even more dramatic turn when you look at what happened during the Fever's next game after Sophie's media blitz. The team was playing the Chicago Sky, and everyone was watching to see how officials would handle the situation. Would they crack down on Sophie? Would they finally start protecting Clark? What happened was something nobody expected. The referees called the game completely differently. Every touch foul on Clark was called. Every aggressive play was whistled. It was like watching a completely different sport. And Sophie? She played 37 minutes without a single technical foul, despite maintaining her protective stance around Clark the entire time. The message was clear. Sophie had won this battle. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Sources close to the situation have revealed that Sophie's stand has inspired something much bigger within the league. Players are starting to speak out about other issues they've been forced to stay quiet about. Pay disparities, travel conditions, marketing decisions that favor certain players over others. Sophie didn't just open a door, she kicked it off its hinges. The WNBA's Players Association has reportedly been flooded with requests from players wanting to know their rights when it comes to speaking publicly about league issues. Labor lawyers have been consulted. Meetings have been held. What started as one player defending her teammate has evolved into what some are calling a player empowerment movement. And Sophie, she's become something of a folk hero, not just to Fever fans, but to basketball fans everywhere who believe in fairness and transparency. Her social media following has exploded from a few 100,000 to over 2 million. Brands that typically shy away from controversial athletes are lining up to work with her. She's proven that sometimes being real is more valuable than being safe. The impact on Caitlin Clark has been profound as well. In recent interviews, Clark has been more vocal about the physicality she faces, something she was previously reluctant to discuss. Having teammates like Sophie who have your back no matter what, that changes everything. Clark said after a recent game, "She's shown me that it's okay to stand up for yourself." That statement alone represents a massive shift in how young stars might approach the league going forward. Caitlin Clark, the face of the WNBA, feels empowered to speak out because of Sophie's example. What does that mean for future rookies? What does it mean for the culture of women's basketball? The league's response has been telling. They've quietly implemented several changes that seem directly related to Sophie's campaign. Officiating crews are now required to review points of emphasis before games involving high-profile players. There's been an increase in the number of flagrant fouls called league-wide, and perhaps most significantly, fine structure for player comments about officiating is under review. But Sophie's not satisfied with these small victories. In her most recent press conference, she made it clear that this is just the beginning. "We're not asking for special treatment," she said. "We're asking for consistent, fair officiating that protects all players, especially those who are growing the game." If that's too much to ask, then maybe we need new leadership. That last comment sent another shockwave through the league offices. Sophie Cunningham wasn't just challenging referees anymore. She was challenging the entire power structure of the WNBA. And based on the support she's receiving from fans, media, and fellow players, she might actually have the leverage to create real change. The financial implications of Sophie's rebellion can't be ignored either. The Indiana Fever have seen a 30% increase in merchandise sales since Sophie began her campaign. Their social media engagement is through the roof. Games featuring the Fever are drawing record television ratings, not just because of Clark, but because fans want to see what Sophie will do next. This has created an interesting dynamic where Sophie's problematic behavior is actually profitable for everyone involved except the league office. Team owners are reportedly split on how to handle the situation, with some privately supporting Sophie's stance while publicly maintaining neutrality. What makes Sophie's situation even more fascinating is that she's not a superstar in the traditional sense. She's not putting up 20 points a game or making all-star teams. She's proven that influence in modern sports isn't just about statistics. It's about authenticity, courage, and being willing to say what others won't. The ripple effects are already being felt across other sports leagues. NBA players have been tweeting support for Sophie. NWSL players have started speaking out about their own officiating concerns. Even MLB players have referenced pulling a Cunningham when talking about standing up to league offices. But perhaps the most significant development is what's happening behind closed doors. Sources indicate that the WNBA Players Association is using Sophie's situation as leverage in upcoming CBA negotiations. They want stronger protections for players who speak out about legitimate concerns. They want transparency in officiating reviews. They want a voice in how the league markets and protects its stars. Sophie Cunningham has become the unlikely face of a revolution she never planned to lead. All she wanted was fair treatment for her teammate. What she got was a movement that could fundamentally change how professional sports leagues interact with their players. As we look ahead, the question isn't whether Sophie will continue speaking out. She's made it clear that ship has sailed. The question is whether the WNBA will adapt to this new reality or continue fighting a battle they've already lost. Because here's the truth, Sophie Cunningham isn't out of control. She's in complete control, and that's exactly what terrifies them. The league created this situation by ignoring obvious problems for too long. They allowed their biggest star to be targeted while pretending everything was fine. They thought players would stay quiet to protect their careers. They didn't count on Sophie Cunningham deciding that some things are more important than playing it safe. What happens next will define the WNBA for years to come. Will they embrace transparency and player empowerment, or will they double down on outdated control tactics that clearly aren't working? One thing's for certain, Sophie Cunningham isn't going anywhere, and neither is her message. If you made it this far, drop a comment below about whether you think Sophie's doing the right thing by speaking out. And don't forget to subscribe because this story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The WNBA thought they could control Sophie Cunningham, but she's proven that sometimes the most powerful thing a player can do is refuse to be controlled.